the 13th of November, 2022. A quiet college town in Idaho wakes to a scene straight out of a nightmare. 4 bright young students slaughtered in their own home. No signs of forced entry, no screams heard, just silence and blood. As investigators raced against time, a chilling surveillance video emerged. A white Hyundai Elantra, circling the neighborhood like a predator. Inside it, a man with a PhD in criminology, who just might have committed the perfect crime. This case has baffled experts, sparked internet sleuths into overdrive, and left a campus community forever haunted. But what really happened inside 1122 King Road that night? Join us as we uncover the chilling timeline, the shocking arrest, and the dark online trail that paints a disturbing picture of obsession, control, and murder. If you're drawn to real-life mysteries and dark stories, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. New mysteries drop every week on Mystery Unlocked. The story begins in Moscow, Idaho, a peaceful college town where crime is rare and students roam freely without fear. Among them were 4 friends: Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. Kaylee and Madison were lifelong best friends, practically inseparable since middle school. Both were seniors at the University of Idaho and had just enjoyed a night out at a local bar called the Corner Club. The two returned home around 1:45 a.m., chatting and laughing, completely unaware that their lives would end in just a few hours. Meanwhile, Zana and her boyfriend Ethan had spent the evening at a fraternity party nearby. They too returned home around the same time, heading to their room on the 2nd floor of the house. It was a typical college night, carefree, casual, and unremarkable, until everything went silent. The house at 1122 King Road was a 3-story rental known among students as a party spot. It had 6 bedrooms and 2 roommates who were home at the time, but would survive. The layout of the home would later become a central focus of the investigation. How could someone murder 4 people on 2 different floors without waking anyone else? The answer, it turns out, is both terrifying and calculated. Sometime between 4 a.m. and 4:20 a.m., a masked intruder entered the home. He moved swiftly from room to room, stabbing each victim with a large fixed-blade knife. There were no defensive wounds reported for some of the victims, suggesting they were killed in their sleep. Others, like Zana, had bruises consistent with fighting back. Her father would later say she fought like hell. The crime scene was described by officers as one of the most gruesome they had ever seen. Blood seeped from the walls. The victims were found in their beds. And yet somehow, the killer vanished without a trace. The 2 surviving roommates reportedly heard strange noises that night, but assumed it was partying or someone playing with a dog. One of them opened her bedroom door and saw a masked man in black walking past her. Frozen in fear, she locked her door and didn't call police until hours later. That delay would become a major point of speculation online, but investigators would reveal it was trauma and confusion, not guilt, that kept the 9/11 call from coming sooner. The question now loomed: who would commit such a calculated, brutal massacre, and why? Despite the sheer brutality of the murders, the killer left behind almost no trace. No fingerprints, no murder weapon, no signs of forced entry. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air. But small details began to surface. Details that would slowly piece together a picture of a very real suspect. One of the first major breaks in the case came from a neighbor's security camera. At around 4:20 a.m., it captured the faint sound of a scream, followed by a dog barking. That timestamp aligned almost perfectly with the estimated time of death. Investigators then turned their attention to digital evidence. Surveillance footage from the neighborhood began to paint a chilling timeline. A white Hyundai Elantra was seen circling the area multiple times between 3:29 and 4:20 a.m. It didn't belong to any of the victims or known visitors. It was clear now. The killer had stalked the house, circled, watched, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. In the days that followed, police tracked down over 22,000 registered vehicles matching that make and model, but one in particular stood out. A car registered to a 28-year-old man living across the border in Pennsylvania. His name was Bryan Kohberger. When police looked deeper into Kohberger, things got disturbing. Fast. He was a PhD student studying criminology at Washington State University, just 10 miles from the crime scene. He had previously studied under renowned forensic psychologists. His academic work focused on understanding the minds of criminals, specifically how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making. But it didn't stop there. In June 2022, just 5 months before the murders, Kohberger posted a chilling questionnaire to Reddit. In it, he asked convicted criminals to describe how they planned their crimes, what they felt during them, and how they avoided detection. It read less like a study and more like a blueprint. Cell phone records showed Kohberger's phone had pinged near the King Road home at least 12 times before the night of the murders. He had been watching them, learning their routines. On the night of the killings, his phone was suspiciously turned off between 2:47 and 4:48 a.m., the exact window in which the murders occurred. But perhaps the most damning piece of evidence came from the crime scene itself. Though the killer appeared to have been meticulous, he slipped up just once. On the sheath of the knife left near one of the victims, investigators found a single male DNA sample. That DNA would later be matched to trash pulled from Kohberger's family home. With mounting evidence, police finally moved in. On the 30th of December, 2022, Bryan Kohberger was arrested at his parents' house in Pennsylvania. He had driven cross-country with his father just days after the murders, allegedly under the guise of celebrating the holidays. But what no one knew then was that the man in handcuffs had been in plain sight all along, watching, studying, preparing. The question that remained now wasn't just who did it, but why. Bryan Kohberger wasn't your typical murder suspect. He had no criminal record, no known history of violence, and no personal connection to the victims. At least not one authorities could immediately prove. But behind his academic resume and quiet demeanor, a disturbing portrait began to emerge. Former classmates described Kohberger as socially awkward, intensely analytical, and obsessed with the criminal mind. Some recalled how he would dominate classroom conversations, inserting himself into discussions with unsettling detail, particularly when it came to serial killers. Others spoke about a sudden change in his behavior in the months leading up to the murders. He had lost weight, grown more intense, and seemed to fixate on control, especially in how people perceived him. There were also reports that Kohberger may have visited a local bar near the University of Idaho, where some of the victims were known to hang out. A former employee claimed he made female patrons uncomfortable, allegedly staring and following them. But these interactions were difficult to prove. Online, Kohberger's digital footprint was equally chilling. His Reddit post asking criminals how they felt while committing crimes gained renewed attention. Some experts now believe it may have been a way for him to gather data, not for a thesis, but for real-world execution. Then came another piece of evidence that shook the case wide open. Kohberger's DNA wasn't just found on the knife sheath. It also partially matched a touch DNA sample found on a garbage bag outside his apartment. And when investigators reviewed his phone data, they discovered something even more disturbing. He had returned to the crime scene just hours after the murders. At 9:12 a.m., with police and media still unaware of what had happened, Kohberger's cell phone pinged in the area of King Road once again, as if he came back to admire his work. Was it curiosity, arrogance, or an unquenchable thirst to relive the moment? Authorities believe Kohberger saw himself as intellectually superior, someone who could outsmart investigators and commit the perfect crime. But it was his arrogance, they say, that ultimately exposed him. Today, Kohberger sits in jail, awaiting trial. He maintains his innocence, and his attorneys have signaled they will fight the evidence at every turn. The death penalty remains on the table. But for the families of Kaylee, Madison, Zana, and Ethan, justice can't come fast enough. The Idaho college murders shook a nation, not just for their brutality, but for how methodically they were executed. 4 promising lives stolen in the dead of night by someone who studied murder for a living. And while Bryan Kohberger hasn't been convicted yet, the evidence paints a haunting picture of a man who may have turned theory into practice. We'll be watching this trial closely, because if there's one thing this case proves, it's that the scariest monsters don't wear masks. They blend in, they study us, and sometimes they walk among us in broad daylight. If this story sent chills down your spine, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Mystery Unlocked drops new true crime videos every week, diving deep into the stories others won't tell.